We would be honored if you would join us.
Greetings and welcome to another YouTube episode of Film Stories with me, Dan Cooper. Today we're going to jump straight into an interview with Stephen Dudro. Stephen Dudro is the art director on Sorry to Bother You, which was one of my absolute favourite films of 2018. So without any further ado, let's jump into the chat. So, yeah, I'm here with Stephen Dudro, who is the art director on Sorry to Bother You. So, Stephen, tell us, what point in the film's production do you, as the art director, come on board?
Usually, it varies, but always in the pre-production process. Mm-hmm. Typically, either a week or so after the production designer comes on board, and has a minute to sort of think through conceptually what's going to happen. Immediately soon afterwards, that person hires an art director so that all the ideas are always sort of presented with the practical feasibility aspect in mind.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of. Was it a lot of it shot on set? On set, so was it locations that were kind of augmented with design?
Yeah. So, when we first got the script and read through it, and there are all these sort of fantastic realism. I mean, it's a very Boots Riley, the director, had a very particular vision for what he wanted, and it took a while to the first challenge was to sort of figure out what exactly he was after, and so there was a lot of back and forth, and the one interesting thing was that all the fantastical elements and sort of this surrealist quality, but he very much wanted to film it all like on location in Oakland, in very particular places that he knew and loved and was familiar with. And so originally there was going to be no builds whatsoever in the film, and they wanted to shoot it all on location. And so it was all so at first it was about those 6 weeks was quickly eaten up by location scouting, and we scouted and weren't really locking anything down, and so it began during that pre-production phase. It quickly became more and more art department heavy, where it was we got the locations we could, and then it was up to us to transform those places into the sets that you see in the film.
Was that helped by? Boots Riley himself is an artist, so was it easier compared to other previous roles that you've had? Was it easier because you were working with a director who's also an artist? I'm thinking in the same way as kind of Blade Runner is a beautiful film to look at, and part of that is that the director Ridley Scott came from the art department background.
I think the simple answer is no. It makes it more challenging. It makes it more difficult because when you're working with someone, and this was Boots Riley's first film he had ever directed. He's a musician and an artist, and so he had, the challenge is that he had a very specific, I think, at least sense of what he wanted and wanted everything to be, and he kind of knew, so he would know when he was getting close, but that made him very particular about a lot of things, and so it was, it really took us a lot of work to kind of extract that from him and kind of get into his imagination and build, because again, he was sort of pulling from inspiration of on one hand he had the gritty realism films that sort of maybe spoke to the location of Oakland, but then he was also had he also loved very fanciful stuff like the Michel Gondry animation and all that kind of thing. And so we would say, so do you want it to be gritty realism, or do you want it to be magical surrealism? And he would say, both.
Both, yeah, of course.
So,
and you would scratch your head and wonder, how do we do this?
Yeah, and so we had to, and so that made it a lot more, it made it more difficult, but in the end, I think when you have someone who, it makes all the difference when you have a director who has a keen sensibility and knows what maybe doesn't know what he wants at first, but knows what he doesn't want. It pushes everybody to really search and reach for something special.
And that magic both is one of the reasons that the film is so visually interesting, because it has this sense of heightened reality about it that's so absorbing. I mean, what were your starting points when you began to really focus on, okay, so how do we create this almost dual feeling? What were your thoughts about the looks and the textures? How do you go about creating a world which is both magic surrealism but also a kind of grimy, real aesthetic?
I think it definitely all started with Jason, and I think it speaks to Jason has like his favorite movie is Repo Man. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Oh yeah, the Estevez movie. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that I don't know how they, when they connected and they kind of linked up and had a few discussions, I think it was very clear that Jason's sensibilities and what Boots wanted were actually closely aligned. And so that was kind of our starting point, where it was zany, like urban texture. And so when when I came in and sort of received that, and I like to talk through references and try to get, it's always about how quickly can I get up to speed with the, people that I'm working with. And so I, went home, rewatched Repo Man, and we started looking at photo references and some other sort of just conversations talking about touch points and what things are and what things are not. And that kind of gave you the conceptual framework. We're like, okay, I think I know what we're going for here. And then I think another thing that kind of helped us as well was the being on location, because Oakland, I'm originally from San Francisco. And so the Bay Area has like a very particular feel. And Oakland is sort of, I would describe as like a mixture of San Francisco and like Los Angeles. There's sort of this, it's warmer than San Francisco. It's got this, there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of, there's been a lot of hardship there over the decades. But there's also this like very independent, creative spirit of the place.
And that concludes the first part of our interview with Stephen. If you haven't seen Sorry to Bother You, you absolutely should seek it out. It's a gem of a film. If you want more film stories before I'm back next week, you can find us on Twitter at Film Stories Pod. You can find our podcasts at a podcast downloader of your choice. You can, of course, find our wonderful print magazine, Film Stories, which this month has an exclusive interview with Caitlin Moran via our website, and also Film Stories Junior, issue 4 of our young magazine made by young people for young people is out too. Details of how to get those can be found on our website, filmstories.co.uk. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will be back here next week with more YouTube film stories. I'll see you then. Bye bye.